woke up one morning, hungover, mentally, physically, spiritually, and I started writing a letter to my sister telling her that I was ready to check out.
God even changing my mindset, focus on winning the contest. I asked the Lord to just keep me from evil and then lost
This story is absolutely wild.
That was way harder to digest. That's why when I'm meeting new people, I love them, but I just can't let them inside. You know, I can't let them inside.
All right. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. This is our church. My daughters go to Calvary Academy. I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old that go here. And it's exciting to be here. I want to tell you a story, guys. And the reason I believe this story is important, specifically for you guys, is because when I see young people, I see a blank canvas. And as cheesy as that sounds, you have your entire life before you. And I know that's exciting. Many of you have plans, ideas about what you want to do with your life. And the world is yours, right? It's in your hand right now. But I want to also warn you of some things that along the way got me in lots of trouble. I want to start off with a story. I was born in Medellin, Colombia. Now, when people hear that, South America, we think that's on the other side of the world. It's actually not. It's 3 hours away from Miami, super close. And so I was born in 1978. No need to do the math. I just turned 46. I am old. We came here when I was 1, and I was born to 2 pretty interesting parents. My mother was a professional singer. She was doing great things with her career, and life was looking really, really good for her. And she had a lot of things on her mind, a lot of things that she wanted to do. And she thought a lot of these things would bring her happiness. She wanted to fill what you're going to hear me call the bucket, which every time I refer to the bucket, I'm referring to your heart, okay? Her bucket was full of expectations and things that she thought she was going to be able to do with her life. But she met this man here. This man here is Don Jorge. This is my father. So my dad was a 3rd-generation mafia boss, and that created a lot of issues for my mother. My mother got upset, and of course she was sick and tired of being sick and tired of my father's abuse. She decided to take off because my dad was just putting her through hell and back. So we came to the United States, and we came in a very unconventional way. This guy here, his name is Pepe. Pepe was a Cuban captain of a speedboat, and we flew in from Colombia into Bimini and took a speedboat into Miami. We got into the Miami coast. But as we were approaching the Miami coast, something really interesting happened. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle, there's plenty of stories and movies and documentaries and books out there about this phenomenon. The Bermuda Triangle basically is a 5-mile stretch in where crazy things happen. Lots of vessels have disappeared. Boats, planes disappear from the face of the earth. And all of a sudden, the water gets extremely violent. The winds pick up, and it gets dark almost as night. I'm being tossed around with my mother, almost falling into the water. My mother manages to hold on to me tightly, and some way, somehow, we made it. We made it through the storm, got into the Miami coast. Shortly after moving to Miami, we moved to New York City, to Jamaica. This is an apartment complex where we lived. We had very little money, and so there was a Burger King, and that's what I was filling my bucket with at the time. As a kid, I absolutely loved Burger King. There was a vacuum store right next to it. It was owned by the lady who actually rented the apartment to us. She was a nice lady. I'm sure she was a Christian lady because she was merciful. She gave us a cheap rent, and we used to live there. And we used to collect pennies to buy Lipton soups, which I don't know if you know what a Lipton soup, but it's a canned soup, very cheap. And this is how we survived for a long time. From time to time, I would get to actually eat a burger. As you can see in this picture, we were all excited. This was the day I actually had a burger. I was the only one that could eat the burger because we could only afford one. We were very, very poor. And so at that point in time, that's what I filled my bucket with, my heart. I expected to go to McDonald's once a week at least, and that's what kept me happy. My mother managed to actually move on, and as she was singing, she encountered some people at the nightclubs where she was singing, and this was a very difficult era in American history. It was called the Colombian Bonanza. It was a very scary time in the U.S. where a lot of these bad guys had stormed the U.S. with drugs. So these places where she would sing, this is where these men would congregate. And so, interestingly enough, one of the men came up to her one day and said, hey, we'd love to help you and bring you into our business. The business was an illegal business. And so we became what we call a house bank. At any given point, our closets were filled with money. These men would come, deposit money, because bad guys can't have legitimate bank accounts. And so they find families that are not very suspicious, and this is where they store the money. My mom, quote unquote, did that very well for 3 years. She went up the ladder of these organizations, and in a very short period of time, we went from poverty to luxury. But with that luxury came misery. We had everything. We lived in big homes. We went to private schools. We drove nice cars. We thought that by achieving this, we would be happy. But yet, there were a lot of problems. So many things going on in my life, guys. I used to change schools 3 times a year. We used to move consistently because of the type of illegal business that my family was in. Our homes were constantly raided by the DEA. 3 o'clock in the morning, they would come knocking our door down. And it was a very, very dysfunctional, crazy way to grow up. In 1993, things came tumbling down, and a judge from the southern state of Manhattan indicted my mother for a bunch of charges. She was going to go away for 25 years. So she wrote a letter to the judge, and she said, I know what I've done is wrong, and I would pay for what I've done, but I have 2 young children, and I'm not going to leave them as orphans. And so my mom decided to get on a plane, and we took off. We went back to Colombia, where we are originally from. This is 1993, probably one of the most scariest times in Colombian history. The city was on fire. The government of Colombia had declared war on the cartels. They were looking for a particular man, I'll show you here in a second, but there were curfews, drive-bys, bombs were going off in the city. We would hear 2, 3 bombs go off in the city. It was terrifying. So here in the States, we were running from the police, but in Colombia, we were running from the bad guys and the police. And 4 different agencies were chasing this man. I won't say his name because it's just not worth mentioning his name. Some of you may know who he is. He was a notorious mobster. Unfortunately, we were part of that organization. So one day they came knocking on our door, and they said to my mother, you either give us information on where this man is, or we're going to take you out. My mom, at a very young age, vowed to never give this kind of information, so she got on a plane. She went to Italy, and she sent me to New York City, specifically to some people that were supposed to take care of me. So I arrive in New York City, and I find myself in an even a worse situation. The people that I was going to stay with that were supposed to take care of me